afternoon and welcome to the latest series of the Stargate franchise documentary. I'm delighted today to be joined by the one and only Alexis Cruz, who played the character Clara and Skaara, and Klorel in Stargate SG1. And I suppose, Alexis,
Hey.
in terms of your Stargate memories, it's a long time now since you were involved in that sort of project. And does it feel like it's only been yesterday since you were on the set screening and filming episodes of Stargate, or do you sort of feel the time now?
Oh, no, we definitely feel the time. It's not, yeah, we definitely feel it. But not just because of the time. I think since then, I certainly have, I guess I can only speak to me, like so much has happened in life and in our careers. And for me, my biggest, just last year, I had my son, I got married. So I'm undergoing huge life changes that makes, but frankly, it makes what I did, 2 years ago seem like ancient history because life is so different, such a brand new frontier. So there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, it's definitely a while back. But despite that, it lives with you, right? It's a part of your identity. So it's never really, it's weird. It's familiar when it comes up. Like the other day we had, last Sunday, we had a Stargate, we debuted the Stargate role-playing game for game. It was like, it was yesterday we were together on the set and it was such a good time. So, it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I suppose, Alexis, I spoke to Corin Nemec there just last night, who was playing Jonas Quinn, and he was telling me even till last year, he still gets invited to these conventions all over the world in terms of Stargate, from Brazil to Argentina and France. And he just, even to this day, he's sort of blown away how strong the fan base, even though that the Stargate has sort of finished up, it seems that the fan base and these conventions, it seems, are just as strong as ever.
Absolutely. And, it's a surprise, but it's not a surprise. It's a good feeling to have, to have that validated, I guess, is putting it again. And after so much time, it is a validation. There are generations now of Gators, right? At this point, I think we're probably up to 4th, 5th, and maybe the 6th generation Gators at this point.
And I suppose, Alexis, if memory serves me correct, weren't you on the original Stargate movie before the TV series came out? No?
Yes, sir, I was.
So in terms of that, Alexis, I suppose you probably had a sort of a lead in towards the TV series, because you're obviously, if you appeared in the first movie, obviously it meant that your character was going to be involved in the sort of TV series. So you probably didn't really have to audition, I suppose, for the TV series.
Yeah, thank God. That would have been really awkward. Yeah, it was sort of a straight transfer over when it first came up. And back then, there were sort of tiers for actors in your career by status, So movie stars never did television, and television stars never did commercials, and commercial stars never did, et cetera, down on the line. That doesn't exist in today's world. Media is media, right? And you can be anywhere at the same time. Back then, it was a thing. And so pretty much everybody knew, for the most part, that none of the movie stars of the movie were going to come back to do television. I don't know if it was even presented to them, to be honest. Just that's the way things were. And I was neither a movie star nor a TV star. I liked the franchise. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I'm glad that I did.
Yeah, you certainly made the right sort of call in terms of that, because people will obviously say that although the movie was quite successful, it's a pale shadow in terms of the TV series, in terms of its longevity over 7-8 seasons, in terms of Stargate SG1. If some people look back in the movie, they'll probably remember some characters. Would you ask anyone in terms of Stargate who's Jack O'Neill, say Richard Dean Anderson straight away? It's the name that comes to everyone start to think is thing to start. So in terms of being involved in that sort of project, if you only had the choice between the movie and the TV series, I say you would have gone for the TV series.
I guess. I mean, hindsight being 2020, sure. You know, definitely. On the other hand, you know, there's a thing too, as actors, we're sort of used to the idea that when we do something afterwards, it could go in different directions. So, and for us, we move on to our next story, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not desiring to go and live in one story. So the whole point is move on from story to story. So there's a certain detachment that happens. And of course, it's the same with Stargate too. We were all very prepared, and I was certainly too, to prepare to detach myself from it. And then it just it wouldn't go. So,
and I suppose Alexis, your character, you two characters in the one body, as the saying goes, the good and the sort of a bad. How fun was that to play from one episode being a good guy and in the next episode being the bad guy, and a sort of a flip of a switch in some sort of series between the good and bad? Was that sort of enjoyable for you because it gave you both sides and both dimensions, and it got you got to explore so many different dimensions or so many different aspects of the character? Whereas if you were typically the good guy all the time, it would be some guy. But you almost got to play the good and the bad. So you got to see the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you know, they're fun, and there's challenges in both, right? And then most people, most actors would say that it's more fun to play the bad guy. I've often said it's more fun to play the good guy, just because your expectations, so the audience expectations for a good guy, are sort of already there, and then you have to really work to fill those expectations, really to substantiate that relation to the audience. And that can be trickier, right? Because the bad guys are allowed to be more interesting right out the back, louder rather, in whatever it is their motivations are. But in this case, this was fantastic because I got to do both of them in real time, as it were. It wasn't like, oh, here in this movie I'm a good guy, and then in that movie I'm a bad guy, and there's separate contexts and separate ways of being. Here it was, you could go from scene to scene as I flip back and forth, and so there's a third challenge in that in and of itself, which was super fun, right?
Yeah, I suppose, Alexis, the memory of one of the episodes that stand out to me was the time your character Skaara was trying to get his body back, and it sort of went to this sort of a trial in terms of
Pretense.
and Goa'uld and SG1 sort of fighting over the rights for your sort of body. And in terms of that, you sort of the Goa'uld sort of voice, the technology, how was that sort of done? Was it something, or was you spoken in to enhance your sort of voice afterwards to sort of make it this sort of screechy sort of darkness sort of thing? Was that all sort of animated sort of voice control?
Wait, could you repeat that again? I'm not sure I understood the question.
Yeah, just in terms of the Goa'uld sort of voice, in terms of that for your character, was that sort of an animated sort of voice screening enhancement that they did to make your voice sound like?
Yeah, that was all in post-production through the post-special effects that they did. They would make the eyes light up digitally, and flange the voice. The sound effect was called a flange. I don't know why, but so they made that happen in post. What I did do though, which most people don't know, but the makeup artist and I, what I wanted to do is I had put on my eyelids as Klorel, I had glitter, like a yellow glitter, gold glitter on my eyelid, so that basically every time I blinked of some kind, there'd be this little flash that nobody would know where it was coming from because it's so subtle. It's just a little glitter, glint, like. And I would use that at different times for an effect on a certain line or a certain line, you know, whether somebody blinks or doesn't, what that moment happens. So that was about the only practical effect that there was in terms of that I sort of added in as a character touch to help in the real time.
Yeah, and I suppose, Alexis, in terms of Stargate SG1, a massive production, big budget sort of production in terms of its staging there, in terms of its location. And the first day when you arrived on set, I know you were involved in the movie, but still, you start to still be taken back by all that was sort of available, even the sort of digital enhancements for the sort of Goa'uld ships that you were on, to all these sort of visual effects. Did it sort of take you back, or did it start to say a eureka, wow sort of moment, sort of a jaw-dropping? Was there any sort of jaw-dropping moments on the set of Stargate SG1 for you as an actor?
Sure, there were a couple of it, especially in those early days. So originally, my experience and my understanding with Stargate in terms of terrain was desert. It was all desert. My part in it was desert, and what wasn't desert was in a military bunker somewhere, as far as I understood Stargate. So when I got the first day of the pilot for the show, and we flew up to Vancouver, our set was in the middle of this forest, and it was 6 in the morning, and it's this foggy, dewy, wet forest, and I was completely fish out of water. Was totally disoriented that we were doing Stargate. And this stuff is in the script until you see it in front of you and you're living it again, experiencing that. It was really, really bizarre. And then after that, it was orienting myself to the cast, who were all new to me, but who some of them were playing characters from the film. So I had to readjust, and that was mind-blowing to see everybody doing their part. Michael Shanks taking over for James Spader, and then meeting, of course, Richard Dean Anderson, who for me was a hero since MacGyver. I grew up on MacGyver, so that was, any which way you cut it, I was meeting an icon, and I was super, super thrilled about it. And then it just took off from there. So it was really easy. When you come to something full of joy and excitement, and everybody was excited about it. I think everybody knew that they were doing something important, and everybody really wanted to be there, and everybody wanted to do a really, really, really good job.
Yeah, and I suppose, Alexis, can I ask you your first sort of memories of meeting Richard Dean Anderson, and your sort of, can you remember the conversation? I remember doing a documentary in the A-Team. I spoke to Dwight Schultz, and he told me the first time he met George Papard, and he walked into his trailer, and George Papard turned around and said, "Hi, I'm George Papard. I'm not a very nice guy," or something like that. That was his first time said to Dwight Schultz. In terms of your memories, your first time, I suppose, Richard Dean Anderson, a blockbuster. What was your first interaction or memories, or can you remember meeting Richard Dean Anderson for the first time on set, and your first conversation or chat with him? What was that like? Or I know.
Sure, it was like it was yesterday, actually. I walked onto set. He turned over to me, waved me over. He said, "Mr. Cruz," pulled out his hand. He shook my hand very, very firmly, looked me in the eyes, smiled, and he said, "It is such an honor to have you here with us. Thank you for doing this. Welcome."
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, sure, MacGyver. Of course. I'm thrilled to be here. The honor's mine. And that was that very first meeting. And then it just continued like that, for the rest of the way. We had a very good relationship. It was really easy to connect with him as O'Neill. And of course, he's a very good actor, so he connected with me just as well.
I suppose, Alexis, nearly all of the original cast is still alive with us today, except sadly for Don Davis, who played the role of General Hammond. And in terms of that, I suppose I spoke to Bill Dow yesterday. I mentioned that the sort of transition when Don departed the role as sort of General Hammond, and Beau Bridges came in, just didn't really feel the same. It was almost like it was the one position that sort of, when he left so big shoes, and it was sort of to fill, and it didn't sort of feel that sort of curve, didn't feel sort of right when he sort of left it all the same. You could tell his absence almost.
Yeah, that's true. And to be frank, I'm glad that was the case. I'm glad it was like that. If we didn't miss him, he had just come and gone, that would have felt weird to me. So the fact that there was this meta reverberation of his loss in the narrative and then in real life for us as in character and us out of character, and then you guys as the spectator, right? So there was this meta reverberation of his passing, and it did affect the show, and that's how real life is. Like, you can't replace people, you know.
And I suppose, Alexis, we talk about Stargate, and in terms of, for a long part of it, it was always the bad guys that met their demise and the good guys sort of triumph. But towards the end of the season, they did introduce storylines. Dr. Janet Fraser sort of met her demise in it, and there was other story. That sort of brought a sense of realism to as well, because sometimes TV shows can become a bit camped after a while, where it's just almost the feeling the good guys are going to always sort of win out in terms of that. So it's always good to add a bit sort of realism to a story sometimes, even though it might be fictional.
Sure, and it's necessary, or else, because it's not a cartoon, you know, it's still it's a grounded space opera, and even in, you know, like even when we have sitcoms, really, that's probably a great example. Even in the funniest sitcoms, there are moments of sobriety and solemnness when a real point is getting across, or, you know, there's a consequence to an action, there's a big decision that has to be made, so that, you know, in context, because ultimately when the lesson that comes around is, don't take things too seriously so that you can get through them, but there are serious things in the world, you know. And then I think Universe took that, SG Universe took that to a whole new level, because that was very, very drama focused, more than the other. You know, SG1, it was an adventure show as opposed to an action thriller, and so Universe came a little closer to that, and I think that's good. I think over time, in hindsight, we now have this range of what Stargate could be, right, from the film through its various incarnations and spin-offs.
And I suppose, Alexis, one of the most important aspects, I suppose, Stargate SG1's success is, normally when you see about sci-fi shows, you take your Star Trek, you take your Star Wars, very successful, but they have these really sort of aliens from Cyclops, the sort of things that play the bad guy. Most of your bad guys, your bad characters were played by mortals as such. Obviously, they had snakes in their heads, but at the end of the day, it was a mortal playing the role. It wasn't this sort of dragon animated sort of thing. And sort of people can sort of get a sense of a character, a sort of bad sort of element to a character, and sometimes fans have a draw towards the bad guys anyway, and in terms of liking their sort of favorite Goa'uld or Master Lord. I suppose it's important, that sort of sense as well, that to show extra dimensions to not only the main sort of protagonists, but the anti-villains as well.
Well, yeah, everyone is the hero in their own story, right? Including the bad guys. So it's just good story to have every person presented with legitimate motivations, right? Realistic needs and wants and desires. And it just makes it more interesting, and then it makes it more special when the good guys, if there are good guys in the story, when they do overcome it.
I suppose, Alexis, you've not only featured in Stargate SG1, you've featured in one or two of the Stargate sort of spin-offs as well. And what was that sort of like in terms of making sort of guest appearances on those sort of shows? A different sort of take in terms of Stargate, but your sort of sense and feeling towards them at the time.
Wait, on which shows?
Did you Stargate the Stargate universe, the Lost sort of ship? Did you play a guest episode on that?
Wait, no, I wasn't on Universe or Atlantis. I didn't do episode. I only did SG1.
Apologies about that. It's miss artifact there. But
no, because what happens is because we're often together at conventions and other events, like the family it's you know, our Stargate family is not just nuclear, right? So what happens? It's very easy to get us all mixed up, and we're all so close, and we all or so many of us communicate, and you'll see us present together as if we were on the same show, even though we weren't. It's just the nature of our friendships, our relationships in real life. So it, you know, easy to do.
I suppose, Alexis, in terms of, lastly, in terms of your character, Skaara and Klorel, I suppose a line each, if both characters were put in the dictionary, and as far as in Stargate sort of fan sort of dictionary, and a blank sentences was left underneath their character. You, as Alexis Cruz, you portrayed both of them. What would you like those sentences to read?
Wow, that's kind of deep for the last minute. I think I've never thought about that at all. I think Klorel would be something, you know, his something of his quote would be like, "And of course they loved me," right? Something absolutely absurd like that, and somewhat diabolical. And with Skaara, I don't know that he would, to be honest. I wouldn't even know what to say about Skaara, because for me, in my mind, being him, in a sense, you know, having to give him that life, his whole story, his narrative really has to do about what other people are going to make that judgment. I don't know what I would have him say about himself, if that makes sense. I don't think he's just not that kind of guy, you know?
And I suppose one last question that came to mind there in terms of Stargate. I'm going to right back to the very sort of first episode, and I suppose that sort of graphic imagery of the first episode, it really sort of shocked people to the core. The nudity sort of scene where the Goa'uld is going into the back of Michael Shanks's wife or girlfriend in the sort of series, and was that sort of deep in one sense, because it never sort of went back towards that sort of scene? Was the reaction towards that? Was it very much offended, or at that time in terms of that? What was the sort of reaction towards it? Do you sort of remember any sort of take to it? Because it was very sort of explicit in terms of an opening sort of episode, and he didn't really go in that sort of direction again.
Right. So that was entirely a product of the rules for broadcast cable television and the different levels of explicitness in anything. So what that means is when the show was first developed as a TV show, it was for Showtime, right? So one of these cable stations where anything goes. You could curse, you could have nudity, you could have graphic violence, you could do all of these things. And there was an audience for that, and that audience knew who it was already. It wasn't like they were trying to open up a new market, right? There's plenty of successful cable shows. So that was the direction that Stargate first went in. And based off of the film, which was, while it was science fiction popcorn, it was a serious film, at least compared to what came later on in terms of that dramatic tension. The moments of levity were very brief compared to Places in the City, like, the series. I said it wasn't an adventure show; it was a drama, right? So it was following that initially, and it was gonna. Ideally, it was going to keep hitting like that for the entire way. And it probably would have turned into something closer to what we then experienced later was Battlestar Galactica, was The Expanse, was shows like this, is what initially Stargate was supposed to be. But when Showtime didn't want to, well, I don't know who the wants or whatnots, but when it moved from Showtime and Syfy Channel picked it up, the show needed a home. Syfy Channel was not this sort of loose thing, right? So they had to change how it happened. And in that transformation to make it fit for Syfy Channel so that they could have a show on the air, quite frankly, otherwise it would just be canceled and nobody would do anything. They had to find a home for it. So those were the rules, and they had to clean it up. But in cleaning it up, it found its heart. And that's really what was ultimately amazing. I couldn't say how much of that was intentional, how much of that was just fortunate accident, you know, yeah. But it found its heart, and therefore it found its legs, and it grew an audience. And the producers and the writers and, of course, the cast, everybody associated with it ran with it, and they just did a great job. Which goes to show that they were the kinds of people who were capable of doing that, even though the initial pilot started off on this harder edge tone, right? They could still pull it back, soften it, and still accomplish just as much, if not more, frankly.
Alexis, thanks for answering that sort of question. It was a question that one of our fans brought up to us, and I was just wondering in terms of that. So, but obviously that's a revelation in itself, and a great way to sort of to finish the interview. Alexis Cruz, an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening. Remember your memories of Skaara and Klorel and those so many episodes you played in Stargate SG1. Still very popular to this day. I suppose there's big demand for another sort of TV series, spin-off, maybe a movie. And if an opportunity came about for you to play a cameo role, would have in if there was a movie, and would that be something that you'd be given 2 thumbs up to?
Probably. I don't see why not.
On that note, Alexis Cruz, pleasure talking to you this evening, and take care.
Thank you. You too. Pleasure.